Hey there, y'all. It's time. Man, I've been looking forward to this one. It's time to count down my top 10 favorite Petra albums. It's coming right up. Stay where you are. Hey there, y'all. Welcome back to another Tim Talks Christian Rock. Tim Risto here. Hope you're doing awesome today, and may God bless your day going forward from here. I am so excited for this episode here today because I had the opportunity to sit down and think about my top 10 favorite Petra albums and figured out which ones would make the list, which ones wouldn't, what was up for consideration, where they would rank, and what would be my top Petra album. This has actually been a lot of fun to go through this process. So we're going to take a look at that today. Petra, of course, is one of the greatest Christian rock bands in Christian music history, or any history for that matter, any music history for that matter. Fantastic band, and they're still recording music today, over 50 years later. They released Hope here in January of 2026, which is their 20th studio album. So with so much music with this band over the decades, you may be asking, well, what albums were up for consideration on your list, Tim? Good question. These were right here. These 20 studio albums are what I looked at to come up with my top 10. So half of these are on my top 10 list. But I didn't consider the live albums, Captured in Time and Space or Farewell. No compilations, of course, even though there were some new tracks on some of those, usually just, radio edits and things like that. None of the solo work by any of the guys, no John Schlitt, no Greg Volz, no John Lowry, no two guys from Petra material, no GHF, God Has Forgiven, the original Petra guys, no Classic Petra or CPR, although Classic Petra, that first album, I almost put in for consideration because it's got all the original Petra guys from that era. But I decided I'll stick kind of hard and fast to my rule. So it's just these 20 studio albums that were up for consideration, and I pulled 10 from this grouping here. Coming in at number 10 is Petra's latest album, Hope, here from 2026. Yes, Petra's latest album just barely made my top 10. And if you saw my original review, you might be a little surprised by this. But in subsequent videos, too, I've talked about how this album has really grown on me. It's a more mature Petra album, and it's got a little more variety to it. It's a little mellower in parts. But it still has a lot of rockers on it as well, too. It takes some chances in songs like Oxygen and Looking Back. But it has just been an album that the more I've listened to it, it's kind of got into my psyche more. And it is an album of hope, which I really, really love. That's a kind of consistent thread through the album. So it has grown on me, both musically and certainly lyrically. I really do like this album a lot. So it made my top 10 because any new Petra is just so exciting to have. And so I've really warmed up to this album. This is a unique one for me, too, because I did get the pre-release. I followed this from, late last year at some point. It was September, October. I actually finally heard about it whenever there was an announcement about it, and I was able to go and pre-purchase the pre-release version of it. So, I kind of got into this on the ground floor, got the original package that included the Petra hat, the T-shirt here, the Hope T-shirt. There's the Bible study, the pre-release CD, sticker here and stuff like that. A lot of stuff that you got with that original package. So I kind of got in on that. And then, of course, when the album came out, the vinyl release came out, I got this black vinyl actually just a few months ago. But I did buy recently, and I've shown this in another video, but I did buy the autographed vinyl that was available through Girder Records. So I picked that up. That is now framed, as I talked about in the previous video, and hanging here on my studio wall. Very nice to have. I love having it autographed by all the current Petra members. So that's kind of a little personal thing for me that's really cool. Also, I did get a chance recently. I won't say too much about this, but you'll learn more about this soon. I did get a chance to interview both John Schlitt and Bob Hartman for something coming out in the not-too-distant future. So more on that later. So this album does have kind of some personal connections. It was the first time I was able to interview both Bob and John separately, but it was really a blast. So this album already has a lot of kind of neat personal attributes for me, but it does come in at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is 1981's Never Say Die. What a great title for an album, huh? I love that title. Great, great title, Never Say Die. I always thought that would make a great title for a James Bond film, wouldn't it? Or has that been used already? I don't think it has. Never Say Never Again. I know that one was Never Say Die. I don't know if they've had that as a title, but if they haven't, they should use it. It's a great one. Anyway, this was the album that really was signifying Petra starting to become the Petra that we would all know and love, in particular during this classic rock era of Petra. This was 1981. Prior to this, you'd had the first album, Petra, then you had Come and Join Us, then you had Washes Whiter Than. And Washes Whiter Than was a much more mellower album. And so this kind of signified more of a return to the rock sound. And it really kind of amped things up, put them more in kind of that Journey vein of classic rock, and is a pretty solid album. It's not the most consistent album, which is why it's not ranked higher on my list. This here is the original Star Song release that I've got on vinyl from 81, and then I also have the Gerda Records vinyl, remastered vinyl release as well, too. You can tell that one has the logo, which really came later on the back, where the original does not. As far as the songs go, of course, it starts with Coloring Song, which was a very popular song for Petra back in the day. Chameleon, one of the great rockers on here, as is Angel of Light. Those two are two of my absolute favorites in the Petra catalog. Killing My Old Man is actually a really cool song. Without Him We Can Do Nothing is a pretty solid one that I think Volz brought over with him from E-Band. And then you get to side B, and that's where things kind of fall apart a little bit. Never Say Die is an okay title track song. I Can Be Friends With You is kind of very forgettable. For Annie has become kind of a classic in the Petra catalog. Father of Lights is okay. And then, of course, it finishes strongly with Praise Ye the Lord. But you can see on side B is, some of those songs that don't quite hit as strongly. And that's why it ranks a little lower for me. But it is a solid entry. This is where Petra started to really become Petra. For me, personally, my connection to this album goes back to about the year this came out, probably a couple years after, 82, 83, 84, somewhere in there. I think 83. My dad, who was a pastor, had just accepted a call to a new church in the Houston area. We were going there. I was getting to know the youth director there at the time as I was getting ready to enter into the youth group. And one of the things he introduced me to, I've told this story before, but was Christian rock. He had a bunch of Christian rock vinyls in the corner of the youth room with the turntable there, and he introduced me to the music, the Christian rock music. And this was the first, one of the first albums I pulled out of that collection that he gave me to listen to. This was definitely the first Petra album cover I ever saw. So I remember this distinctly, pulling this out and going, Petra, Never Say Die. That album cover art just riveted me. It's, of course, great classic album cover art. The first kind of flying guitar album cover art, or was the first flying guitar album cover art in the Petra catalog, and that became synonymous with the man for several albums after this, and even got resurrected for John Schlitt's first album, Back to the Street. So very cool album art. It piqued my attention right away, and I, of course, had to hear this album. I can't remember for sure if this was the first Christian rock album I listened to. I think it was actually Res Band, Awaiting Your Reply, but this one was shortly after that. This is the first Petra album cover that I ever saw. Coming in at number 8 is 1995's No Doubt. This is more of the later era Petra, you could say, even though it's mid-90s, but this was post Dream Team Petra. So for a lot of people, this might be a surprise to put on my list, but I do really like this album. It's actually the first album, technically, I guess, without, or officially, I don't know how you'd say it, without Bob Hartman. He left after Wake Up Call, but he's still really involved. He wrote, I think, all the lyrics and much of the music, if not all of it. He was, I think, actually did the guitar work on this album, even though you've got David Likens is the new guitar player, and Jim Cooper is on keyboards, and then you've still got Louis Weaver, Ronnie Cates, and John Schlitt involved. So it's kind of a mix of the Dream Team Petra and these new guys coming in. But I like the sound on this album, and I like the music. It's still got a Petra vibe that seemed to be pushing forward a little bit, something a little different. And bring the young guys in, I think, was an effort to also kind of help push things in a new direction, maybe be able to hand Petra off at some point to a new era of guys that would kind of integrate in and become the new Petra. This isn't grunge era Petra, it's mid-90s, but they stuck to their sound but gave it a little bit more modern edge to it for that time. And I really like this. This was probably Petra's last really, really good album until, maybe you could say Jekyll and Hyde. I do like this album a lot. My personal connection to it really isn't real big, other than I just loved this album at the time. I remember going to pick up this CD. There is no vinyl release of this, by the way. I am hoping that Girder will yet release this on vinyl, because it's one that really deserves both a remastered CD and a vinyl issue. But I don't have a real strong personal connection to this, other than I remember going to pick up this CD and realizing when I got it that, Hartman's not there anymore. And who are these guys? And what's going on? And listening to it and being pleasantly surprised when I popped this in the CD player that it sounded so good. I was like, Petra could have a whole new life ahead of it. So anyway, this one I really rate strongly. I love the title track. No doubt. I love the opening song, Enter In, Think Twice, Heart of a Hero. Right Place, of course, is just classic Petra for sure. You kind of get on to the album again, kind of the side B, you would say, on vinyl. Some of those later tracks are not quite as strong. I like Think on These Things. That's a good one. I do love this album. Coming in at number 7 is 1987's This Means War. I'm sure some of you are going to be surprised at where I have ranked this album at number 7. Many of you probably rank this album much higher. Putting so much glare. This is a good album. This, of course, was John Schlitt's second album with Petra. It was also the second album produced by John and Dino Elefante with Petra too. I do like this album, but to me it sounds oftentimes more keyboard heavy. Those are much more in the forefront. John Lowry's keyboards really kind of take over a lot of the album. And to my ear anyway, I don't like that as much. They're just a little too heavy. Yeah, there's a lot of guitar stuff in here too, but it just sounds a little too keyboard heavy for me. A little more dated to my ear, and so that's why I don't rank this one quite as high. Love that album cover art, of course. It's bold, it's striking, it's really very cool, and of course that imagery then is pictured in full on the back. Great album. This Means War, phenomenal opening track. One of Petra's best opening tracks ever. Of course, he came, he saw, he conquered. Get on your knees and fight like a man. I am available. Kananaya. You Are My Rock. That open side B, great. The Water Is Alive. That one kind of mediocre for me. Don't Let Your Heart Be Hardened, of course, was a great ballad hit for the song, or for the album. Dead Reckoning I liked, and All the King's Horses is okay too. So again, there's some okay tracks on there, and the sound's a little more dated, so that's why for me it's not as strong of an album or ranked as high. My personal connection to this is I remember reading about this album in CCM magazine, Contemporary Christian Music magazine, and I forgot who wrote this, but whoever did the review of the album said that this was peak Petra, that this was, basically this was the peak of Petra, that from here basically they were going to go down, I think was kind of the implication, that they weren't going to go any higher than this, but that this was ultimate Petra. They obviously went on and did a lot more. Beyond Belief was one of the prime examples of that. This version of Petra went on to do some great things. But I remember reading that going, really? Is this as far as Petra's going to go? I bet they could go higher yet and do more things. But they were also referring to, at the time, this was peak Petra. And certainly it was. And Schlitt was taking them vocally in new places, and Hartman was freed up to write things that drove them much more into the arena rock phase. So good album, but a solid 7 on the list for me. Coming in at number 6 is 1983's Not of This World. Out of This World was the last of the flying guitar or spaceship guitar album cover arts for Petra under the Greg X Volz era. Like I said, they'd go on to revive that for the Back to the Street album, John Schlitt's first album. But for Volz, this was the last of those until Classic Petra, where they did have some back on that Back to the Rock album. But this one also probably was the coolest, most spacey looking of them all, and the album cover art really does evoke kind of the music of this album. I love all the flying guitar albums, I really do. Of course, it opened with Visions, which was really, John Schlitt, who was the keyboardist at the time. This was his last album with the band as well. It really was his great contribution, and that is a phenomenal track. It's both it has the doxology, of course, via keyboards, and the album opens and closes with that, so it's bookends to the piece, and it's just such a cool way. Very, very 70s classic rock vibe to it. Great stuff. Not of This World then follows that, of course, which is just a more mellower kind of acoustic driven track that's very spacey, very much fits the feel of the album art and of the title, of course. That is the title track. But I love that feel to this album. It kind of slows things down at some points, but mostly rocks throughout the whole thing. God Pleaser's on here, of course, which is another really classic one. Bema Seat, which CPR, Classic Petra Resurrection, always opens their concerts with, as Classic Petra did too originally. Grave Robber, Blinded Eyes is a great one. I like Pied Piper a lot. Not by Sight's pretty good too. But again, there's some on here that aren't quite as strong, but I love the feel of this album and the sound of it. It's really a cool album. Again, I've got the original Star Song vinyl release here on vinyl, and also the remastered Girder release, which now apparently is very hard to find. I got a friend of mine that's actually looking for this Girder because I think it went out of print. I only picked up one, so I've only got one copy. If any of you has an extra copy, reach out to me, comments down below, and that you're willing to part with, and see if I can put you in touch with the person who's interested in finding this. But it's a phenomenal album, a solid 6 here on my list. Number 5 is Unseen Power from 1991. Unseen Power, another one that ranks kind of high on my list, and many of you may be surprised by that. Some people do not rank this album as high. This was a great album for me because I remember picking this up. This was still Dream Team era Petra. I remember picking this up and loving it. That opening track, Destiny, was almost heavy metal for Petra. And I remember some interview somewhere, John Schlitt even commenting, says, yeah, I think we got a little too close to heavy metal on that album, especially with that opening track. But I love that. I think it's a phenomenal, hard rock in Petra, and I absolutely love that sound. To me, that's much harder than anything on Jekyll and Hyde, and people always talk about how that's such a raw, gritty, hard-sounding album. I think Destiny sounds much harder than anything on Jekyll and Hyde. I also like the follow-up, Who's on the Lord's Side, just kind of a great gospel-influenced track. Ready, Willing, and Able is pretty good. Hand on My Heart is the one, track number 4, that's kind of a little goofy, a little sappy song. And they did that live on the road and kind of did a little skit with it where they all wore red jackets. That's my personal connection to this album, by the way. This was the first tour that I saw John Schlitt era Petra on. And I remember going to Houston with a buddy of mine and catching this tour. And they were really good. They were so solid. But I remember them doing that Hand on My Heart and these red sequin jackets. And it was a little goofy. But it was fun, too. Side B opened strong on this album with Dance, Secret Weapon, Sight Unseen. Hey World's pretty good. And then In the Likeness of You, I thought was a solid closer, too. So I really like this album. This is a solid one. I think I like this one overall more than even Wake Up Call. I just find this one I listen to more often. There's more tracks on here. It's not all consistent, not wholly consistent, but I really do like it. I think this is kind of peak for me, Dream Team era Petra. I love the album cover art too. I thought that was kind of cool with these, windmills, the fans which that was kind of becoming like the flying guitars were for the classic rock era of Petra. You had Beyond Belief here with the Schlitt era Petra that had the propeller blades on the airplane, and then here you had the fan blades. I thought, oh, they're going to kind of do a trilogy of, I don't know, propeller blade albums, I guess. Kind of leaned into the flight aspect of what the flying guitars did a little bit, but they only had the two, I think, that had these blades on them. But I liked that motif. I thought that they could keep using that in other ways. But again, I've got the girder reissue here, remastered version of it. I don't have the original vinyl. I do have the original CD and the remastered CD as well too. But for me, I really like this album. And having seen Schlitt era Petra live on this tour, for me, was really special. It was a great, great tour. Also, I don't want to forget to mention Unseen Power had a great video came out with it. Backstage Pass, I think it was called. I don't have it anymore, but it came out on VHS. One of my favorite Petra videos. It had, their music videos for that album on it, had some interviews, had a bunch of, kind of goofy stuff here and there too, behind the scenes little bits. Great one. That was probably the best Petra video since the live Captured in Time and Space video. I loved that video. I wish that would come out on like a remastered Blu-ray, but who knows where the source material for that is anymore. Coming in at number 4 is Beyond Belief from 1990. You knew this one would be high up on the list, right? Classic Schlitt era Petra. This was peak Petra for that time, for sure. The arena rock phase of Petra at its peak, and it's a phenomenal album. This one just rocks. There are very few skippable tracks on this album. Armed and Dangerous, it opens with Strong, of course. I Am on the Rock. Creed is great. Beyond Belief, of course, with that great guitar work by Hartman. Love, a nice ballad hit for the band, although I tend to skip that one, I guess. Side B opens with Underground, Seen and Not Heard, Last Days, What's in a Name, and then Prayer, of course, is another a little bit more mellower one. So great stuff. Again, this was kind of the peak, I think, of the Elefante brothers producing with the band. I think they just did phenomenal work here. It was like everything was working in sync together. The band members, the writing, the production, the producing, the album art again. Here's the propeller blade. You can't see it here because it's covered by the hype sticker, but the propeller blade that I was talking about, that kind of motif going on when I was talking about the Unseen Power. But just a phenomenal. It looks 80s. Even though this came out in 1990, it looks 80s, where the band is, small there next to this huge hangar and an airplane. Kind of just classic cover art on so many levels. Love this album. It is a favorite, one that I pull out often to re-listen to. Coming in at number 3 is On Fire from 1988. This is the album for me that secured John Schlitt in my mind with the band. For many, it was This Means War, but for me, On Fire came out, and I love this. It's my favorite of the Schlitt era albums, honestly. Although Beyond Belief is a very, very close second, of course, to that, and that's why that's at number 4, and this is at number 3. This album, I've just got a personal connection to remembering it when it came out. That triple dose of the first 3 tracks is just a phenomenal opening to a Petra album. All Fired Up, which goes immediately into Hit You Where You Live, and then Minefield is a great follow-up to that. Just great songwriting, great rockin' album. It's hard. Still has some of the 80s keyboard influences that This Means War had. Lowry's keyboards are still a little bit front and center on some of the tracks, but I still love it. This is great. This was the first album to feature Ronnie Cates on bass. Dean Kelly left after the This Means War album. So that's cool too. That gives it a new energy too, a little different sound to it on the bass, which is really cool. Side B, Council of the Holy, I really like that one. Stand in the Gap and Homeless Few. The only 2 I tend to skip is maybe number 3 on Side B, Open Book, and First Love, sometime on side A, the ballad song, which is good, but just, again, ballads aren't always my cup of tea. So, but love this album, love the album art. Even more striking than This Means War, I think, with that sword. I mean, the spiritual warfare motif here was just strong. And anyway, love this. This is my favorite Schlitt era Petra. Oh, and my personal story to go along with this quickly is I remember going into a Christian bookstore and seeing the little cassette that was like a preview of this album coming out. I remember seeing it and had, I think, just one track on it on side A, and then a interview, maybe brief interview or promo on the second side. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, but it had Minefield on there. That was kind of the single that was on there on the cassette. And I remember later when this album came out that I realized that the version on the cassette was a different mix than the one that made in the album. I think mainly at the beginning, and then maybe a little bit some of the instrumentation in the mix. So I always thought that was kind of cool. There was a different mix. That was the first time I actually owned two different mixes of a band song. And coming in at number 2 is 1984's Beat the System. This album will forever hold a special place in my heart because it was this tour that I first saw Petra on. And it was in Houston at, I don't remember the arena we were at, but it was a big arena. The place was packed. It was exciting. I went with my brother-in-law, who was leading our youth group at that time, and with the youth group members, and it was very cool to actually see what I think this was my first Christian rock concert, if I remember correctly, was Petra on Beat the System. Seeing Greg X Volz just full of energy jumping around the stage, Bob Hartman playing guitar with that great crazy guitar that he had, that V guitar. Fantastic stuff. I still love this album so much. It takes me back to that time. It's got what some might say a more dated production sound. I think it still sounds pretty fresh because it was so uniquely produced. I love every track on this album. There isn't anything that I skip. I just love this track. Of course, they redid God Gave Rock and Roll to You from the Come and Join Us album, which really was Volz's first album, so they went back and redid that because this was his last album. And of course, this is the tour that produced the live album Captured in Time and Space, which is really great because, again, I can kind of relive that tour that I was on through that album. But for me, it's this original studio album that's just fantastic. Love the sound of it. Love the originality of it. Love the sound of the times that it was. And it's just a fantastic album. So great stuff. This is a solid number 2 for me, and will always love Beat the System. And what is my number 1 top favorite Petra album of all? That would be 1982's More Power to You. You probably saw that one coming. Yeah, this album just holds a special place in my heart. Of course, the Volz era is when I found out about Petra. And like I said, listened to that album, Never Say Die, was the first Petra album cover I ever saw. I think this one was close behind. And if I remember correctly, I heard this one not too long after. This one might have been new or fairly new at the time that I got involved with the youth group. So this was an album that I did hear shortly after and fell in love with it. I love the classic rock sound of this era of Petra. And this is kind of peak Volz. Although Beat the System was pretty darn good too, which is why that's number 2 on my list. And this is number 1. I do love this classic rock vibe. I love the album cover art, which is just the peak of the flying guitars, I think. It's just really cool. It spills over onto the back, of course, with that really ominous-looking mountain. The album art is just cool. I love this album. And again, every song is phenomenal for me. Opens with Stand Up, goes into Second Wind, and the title track, More Power to You. You've got classics like Judas Kiss and Rose-Colored Stained Glass Windows, 2 of my all-time favorite Petra songs ever. Side 2 opens with Run for the Prize, All Over Me, which some people don't like, but I like that kind of slower, gospel-y sound to that one. Let Everything Hath Breath, I think that's another one Volz brought over from E-Band. Road to Zion, which is a little more dated sounding today, but an acoustical kind of sound to it. Love that. And then it closes with Disciple, which again, not everybody's favorite, but I love that. That's one of the few that has Mark Dean Kelly, the bassist, doing vocals, trading vocals with Greg X Volz on that. And I love that. I think it's really cool. This one for me is just peak Petra. If somebody says, does Christian rock have really a classic rock history to it? Yeah, it does. And this is one of the peak albums to recommend. It's phenomenal. Love this album. This will always be a favorite for me. It's hard to top this one because of its point in time, the songwriting, Volz's vocals, just, that high vocal range that he had is on display here. I don't think he can do that anymore, but this was peak time for him on that, and I love this album. Album cover art is just beautiful. With the Girder record release, you get a poster of that album art, and that's what this one is here. The Girder Records reissue of the vinyl. This is the original Star Song I've got too. I've actually got multiple copies of some of these albums because I keep running across the Star Song albums in half-price bookstores and stuff like that. So I pick up those copies whenever I find them. Some are in better shape than others, but I do have a number of copies of the flying guitar era albums of Petra. I keep finding those, and Beat the System too. I'll run across that original one pretty often. So anyway, that's my favorite album. And again, that was one personally I found or was given in a stack of records from the youth director back in the 80s. So it was another early Petra album for me. All right, y'all, there you go. There is my list of my top 10 favorite Petra albums of all time. Do you agree with my list? Do you disagree? Would you rearrange things? Do you have different albums on the list? Let me know. I'm sure some of you were disappointed that like Jekyll and Hyde wasn't on there, or maybe even Wake Up Call. I don't know. But let me know what your top 10 list is in the comments down below. I'd love to hear. Or at least tell me what your number one all-time favorite Petra album is. I would love to hear and engage with you in the comments down below. Petra is such a great band, and so many of their albums are so good. Some of you may be surprised I didn't put one of the Petra Praise albums on there. The first one in particular from '89 I know is a popular one, but those just didn't quite sync with me the way their other albums did. So anyway, that's all I got for today, y'all. Go out, listen to some great Christian rock, make it some Petra today. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal band with a history of fantastic albums. But remember, above all else, stay in God's Word. Blessings, y'all. Have a great one.